Satini Takat Yuhan. Wasayati. Erlasa. Shkahadine.
Elbasa con el cheese.
Ah. Anta. Wasayati. Yak ega.
Yak con cheese.
Yak e. Cheese. Okay. So Ane will be joining us a little bit later. So to start, just check in with folks how they're doing, anything that they'd like to share in Tlingit, anything new that they've learned, exciting happenings, just hello, whatever, or however you can say it in Tlingit, please share with us.
Woo!
Wase Johan. I'm gonna probably get this wrong because I'm just trying to put pieces of sentence together. Hat Keka. I've been beating something, and
Okay.
I don't know if I said that right, but I tried.
Awesome. Okay, sheesh.
Ki Yanui, sorry, Yannick.
Oh, Ishan.
Goodness cheese.
What's away, Yuan? Oh,
Ohio, Aldegon.
how?
Kachchanak tsu kunach aldigan.
Santi kahini goose away.
Downtown. For folks just logging on, we're sharing some things in Tlingit.
Achuch hundaka hidi de wugut.
Yak a.
Banquet kag G we banquet kag.
Achana Wodakeen where Khunadach Yidat Wash needs a ride. Oh well.
Kunach Tsiuda Pusitanya. Ach Chawagenach Kalsak Kwasetin. Gwell Kuka und Tlikach Tua Ushku we Kalsak. Ikege.
Tathuasatu kalsak.
Yeah. Ach Hidi has Awaha. Achwe Tlikach Tua Ushku. They eat my house. I want to shoot the thing, is what I'm saying. But
Agana.
Agana. So you have a little squirrel that's eating your house?
He's the wiring, Achwe Gwal Kant Kukwane Kugwasane. They could start a fire, is what I'm.
Achchiwu trap. Ituwasigu, okay?
Well, wait, trap. Tsotsi. Just trying to think how to say trap. Tsotsi. Ida wants to do a sock trap. Is it starts with, is it got something? I'll just look it up.
Oh yeah.
Wooch saga yekshe.
Like
Egg.
Can see. Tlich chess kalsak gwell manchas tsatsi manchas chagut askutu adi. I've tried to trap them, but I catch other things like birds or whatever in those traps. So ach du hast kokwa und.
Okay, Yakwasatini, fire is Khan, and then as I say, Kaska, fried chicken is good.
Yuck,
Gusu una.
Achidi dach. No, A'atudli Yé. A'atudli Yé. We una.
Islunigi. Isluni kasaki.
Wasa iduwasak forget me not flowers.
Chwasapú.
Kencheyi.
Kakathat chenach chedach kikachwain.
In J Sitka Rose Guafier.
Oh. Trash cut is say what I don't know. What's the Kekahweni?
Guafier.
Flower blossom.
Kinchei.
Yeah, in J is Sitka Rose, and Nawea came up with I don't remember flower in Tlingit.
That's kind of what I was thinking too, but I wasn't sure. Thanks.
Yeah, a lot of that vocab for flower blossom, sheesh, that vocabulary for particular plants, berries. Sometimes it depends on where you are. And then just a lot of things that we haven't either documented or only certain people know them now, but flowers is definitely one of those things, I think.
Goodness, sheesh, Liz. Chwatin. Kinchei.
Kencheyi.
Oh, yeah.
Yedu.
Ja, Atling the chief the cut Johan. Okay, so for this next little bit, we want to focus on conversations, how to make a conversation. So what we're going to do is we're going to split you folks up into random groups. So you'll have the opportunity to connect with multiple learners, maybe at different levels than you, to rely on each other to sort of figure out what would you present as a conversation. It doesn't have to be very long in Tlingit, using your resources, using the folks in your room. One suggested it be a conversation around success, like what would make you feel successful. Are you talking about language learning? Maybe if you've been learning for a while, things that have made you feel like you're getting it. Stuff like that. If you're just starting and you have a group of beginners in your little group, it'll be about a group of 4, I think. It can be, pretty basic stuff. Hi, hello, how are you? Or what you would, when we start in the beginning and we ask, how is everybody doing? Things that you would like to be able to say in Tlingit. In your breakout rooms, if you haven't been in a Zoom room before, in the breakout rooms, you can raise your hand if you have a question or you need me to pop in. There are a lot of you and it's just chat right now. So if you do raise your hand, it might take me a minute, but I'll try and pop in and help. I'm going to rely on some of our more seasoned language learners to help me out, please, if you are in a room with folks that need a little bit of assistance. Are there any questions about that before we sort of go into our separate Zoom realities here? Okay, so if you do end up having a question, like I said, you can raise your hand, use your resources, use the people in your room, and we'll come back together at around 6:10 or so. Ege? Okay, so the room should be open now. So Fligal, are you on 2 different devices? Yeah. Katie, so we are doing some breakout room stuff. You're coming up with a conversation in Flinget. The folks in the room should be able to help you. And then if you have questions, just go ahead and raise your hand. I'll just go ahead and put you in a room if that's good with you.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry.
Hey, Flafa.
Didn't think Ishan would be a good thing to say.
That is, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Wasayati Johan.
Kashmas ʼatudli.átk.
Oh. Juan.
Gonna choose.
It's been a rough year for sure. Maybe someday the border will be open and we'll be able to go up there again. So,
Yes, that'd be nice.
yeah.
It would be very nice.
Yeah.
And I was there. I just missed you,
Celebrations coming soon.
Is it?
You are having celebration?
Not this summer, but next summer. Yeah.
Yeah. Is the DACA still happening?
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. I wanted to take my grandma, but we can't go across the border, so I can't go home.
I mean, probably for the best. Also, it's really hard not to be able to. That border between Alaska and the Yukon is different than the lower border, but oh man. Okay, do you folks have any questions? You guys doing okay?
Well, she just told us what happened in Tesla. Is there a conversation that you can say, I'm sorry for your family, or is there something that you guys know of?
Yeah, so there are some of those words of encouragement that Ane shared, though some of them would be good. Yigu ayak on or igu ayak on, depending on how many people you're talking to. There are some, yeah, I mean, it also depends on their relationship to you, whether you're the opposite clan of them or the same clan or the same moiety, how you would sort of go about supporting the community based on that relationship, and then what you would say would be a little bit different. There's speeches that we could look at to sort of remove grief, but that would happen during the ku'ik part of it. Yeah, that's hard. Let me see if I can find something. Wayne, do you know anything? Shkagoidach.
Hey, sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. Yeah, the only thing I would know is that I won, but I haven't heard any like short, generic sort of thing. That's always fairly specific.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes folks will offer like a song or something like that. Yeah. And then, yeah, again, based on your relationship, whether you would be sort of like holding the blanket, metaphorical blanket up to catch folks' tears. If you're the opposite, that might be something you would say. But if you're of the same moiety or of the same clan, it's a little bit different. There's folks in the main room. I will look and see if I can find some stuff that we can talk about in the main room. Okay.
The only thing I pulled out of one of the things that they were showing yesterday was aho for oh my.
Yeah, there's some like interjections. I mean, Ishan, like Yuhan, Uhan, Ishan, like we're poor or we're pitiful for this having happened. If you are of that side. Okay, I'll be back.
That's almost like telling them that they're dressing too fancy.
But see, I
And
wonder if maybe some of the idea, like you were saying before, is like you honor your people with your good clothing or something like that. Like I wonder if it's a switch of the idea rather than, like you say, taking the personal ownership over it. But
I mean, how do you talk about other people's regalia? That would be interesting for me to know, and maybe other people would enjoy knowing about that too, because it sounds like if you aren't really careful, you can say something that's just terrible. And, I've never actually seen people having a conversation about regalia, even at celebration, in English or in Tlingit. I mean, there must be people who say things like,
well, they
you should wear your hat this way or something.
Well, they do talk about it a lot in ceremonial kind of ways, because they're talking about the clan crest, or they're talking about the artist who made it, or they're talking about, so there's a lot of ceremonial conversations about
Okay. Because I know like have strength and courage, like you're strong, and like just kind of phrases like that. I don't know. Yeah.
That one.
I wish I knew how to use the resources a little better.
Look at you, Han.
Oh, hi, sorry.
How's it going?
Good. If I'm just trying to find I feel like I don't know how to use the resources very well. And so like, for instance, when I took Spanish or German, I could say, how do I say this word? I can find that exact word and then, maybe think about where it goes in the sentence. But the resources I have, and maybe it's just that I don't have the right ones, like there's no dictionary where I find the English word of a noun and it tells me that word. Is that just like it doesn't work that way? Is that kind of what it is?
So there are ways to, the difference with Tlingit is it's not very nouny based. Like there's a lot of verbs that you would expect coming from English to be nouns and they're not. And so often when we're trying to put together sentences, we have to know how the verb works, and then that gets more complicated.
Okay.
So do you have access to the online dictionary? I just posted it in the chat.
Oh, let me go back to there. I'm sorry.
No, it's weird.
I was going to the website for the class. Okay. I'm sure I will in 1 second.
No
Thank you.
worries. And then
The verb dictionary.
Yeah. So yeah, I even have the hard copy of that, but I guess it's
yeah.
still.
So this is a combination of that yellow dictionary and the noun dictionary, this one online. So René has been pulling together all of the dictionaries we have and trying to put them in one spot. I don't know if this is completely finished in that there are all of the verbs from the dictionary or not. I would have to ask him, but this combines a lot of those, so you only have to kind of look at one place. So this is typically where I would go first. You can download the PDF onto your computer, and then there's a table of contents on the left-hand side, depending on what PDF reader you're using, and you can go to the English to Tlingit side or the Tlingit to English side. The Tlingit to English has a lot more information. So if you go English first, let's say you're looking for name is actually a verb in Tlingit, but so you're trying to find out how to say name in Tlingit, you go to the English, find name, and then it gives you that verb root. Then I would go back and look up that verb in the Tlingit side, because that's going to give you a lot more information. If you're just looking on the dictionary online, so you haven't downloaded it, you can, and this also works for if you've downloaded it, it's Command F or Control F, which will let you search the document. So you can type name.
That is what someone said. They said Command F is my friend. And I was like, I don't dare to push it. I didn't dare to push it because I didn't know what it was going to do.
Yeah, I think that was me. It's very.
Oh, it was probably you. I was like, oh no, push it now or when? Okay.
So if you're looking at the document, either on the web or on your whatever PDF reader you're using, if you're on a Mac, it's Command F. If you're on a PC, I think it's Control F, and that'll pull up this like finder bar, and then you can just type in whatever you're looking for, like name. Hit. Sometimes it takes.
Can we do an example?
Yeah.
What if I want to ask the question, what gives you strength? And I don't know any Tlingit words. What would I?
I would start with strength, like that's
Okay.
the big one. So you would go strength. And then you come down to fletsin. So it's a verbal noun. So it's a verb that is behaving like a noun in this particular instance, means strength or power. And then you can see this verb root here if you wanted to look at how to use like be powerful, or this is like if it was verbing some way. So that's what you do there. Questions. If you're looking at how to figure out how to make questions, I would go to the beginning workbook, because there's this graphic that gives you all of the question words, how to say how, what, why, when, and that is on
Is
page.
that this one or is there a different one?
This one. So that it is in that one as well, but the layout's a little bit different. Let me see if I can find it in that one. I can also just.
So I might just be missing a book that would be useful to me.
Yes.
Is that workbook really?
But you can also get this online as well, and I will.
Okay.
So to download the one that you just showed us, or this one, how do I do that? I just click.
Yeah. So
like go to the chat and click on that.
Yeah, so the chat link will take you to this page, and then
Okay.
here in the right hand corner you should see this little arrow button, and
okay.
And that should download it. Same with what
Okay.
I'm going to show here. So if you're looking for the beginning Tlingit workbook, so this is our. Go ahead and click that. It'll take you to the document itself, and you can do the same thing with this as you did with the dictionary, like Control F.
Oh yeah.
Looking for something. Yeah, so this is the workbook, and I will post that in the chat as well here in a second. But questions are it's the first chapter. The chapter 0 is the sounds. We'll go here.
I think it might be lesson 1 because they say dasaya iatin. Dasawe iatin, pardon me.
Yeah. So yes, chapter 1. Sort of towards the back, you have this graphic here, which shows you that plus sa, so that little question marker, and then we, you, and we'll talk about that, what those things do. But yeah, so this is how you find questions. Yeah. Go ahead and stop.
So it was ya and we, right? Ya was.
Yeah, it's like
Was
ya. He is kind of like in my vicinity. We is like general, and then you is way far. Either I can't see it, or it's in another state, or it's in another country, that sort of thing. So ya, he, we, you. He isn't used as often. You'll hear it in like stories and things, but it's kind of it it's saying it's closer to me than it is to you. So if you're trying to specify, like, give me that thing that's right next to me, but not near you, but it's not actually in my possession either. Like it's
Yeah.
very specific. So yeah, ya, he, we, and then you.
So now I have this word da
Mhm.
for what, and then I know I need to say sa.
Yeah.
And then I have this other word, latsin, pardon me, for strength. Do I
Oh.
just string them together, or is there?
Uh,
Do I say dasa
you have to like what?
dasa we latsin, or what do I add there? I'm just trying to think if I were, let's say, trying to make a sentence
Right.
up instead of just looking one up.
Right.
And that might not be a good spot for me to start. I don't know.
Anytime you're giving somebody something or asking how something got there, it gets a little bit more complicated. So you'd probably have to use the verb form of ʼatudli instead of just the noun, because you're asking what is bringing strength to you, like how is that arriving to you? And that's a little bit more complicated. So I would maybe not start with that one, maybe.
That's fine. You had just said, talk about success or feeling, and I was trying to think of, just what should our first question be, and maybe each of us could respond with an answer.
Right.
Maybe I just need you to give me an idea of a question we could ask, and then maybe, Katie would have an answer that's different than Cheryl and different than me, and that would be our conversation.
Yeah, I mean, so if I like my suggestion for folks that are just starting, because this is what I didn't like, just how are you? Where are you going? Like, who are you? Like, pretty basic stuff. So to start a conversation for folks who haven't been studying for a while, unless anyone's like, oh, no, I know this, I want to do it, would be to start pretty basic and then sort of build up to how do you play with something.
I misunderstood. I was trying to,
okay.
I was like, I don't know how to say it. And I'm searching for the word success. And I thought, oh no.
It is all good. Heshwasa. Okay. I think there's.
Thank you for your time.
No problem.
Oh, they're back. Okay.
Wasagiti.
Okay.
ʼatudli.
Ida, were we supposed to come back?
I don't know. So I was helping another group, and then Renee popped on, and it's a little bit, who knows what we're doing, but I think we'll wrap up. We'll bring folks back here in a moment.
We made a skit.
Oh, cozy. Okay. I will go find Renee in the Zoom verse, and I'll be back.
Okay.
Every time I learn new things. Oh my goodness. So how, with the times of day that we talked about last night, can I also say good afternoon, good evening?
Yeah, so the first part should be yak-ayi. So it has this little ye at the end. Yak-ayi. So you could say yak-ayi ʼatudli.átk. You could say yak-ayi. The way I heard afternoon was yak-ayi sit-gausan itach. And yak-ayi chana. So chana is the evening. And you say yak-ayi yagi, good day.
I've never heard that yeah at the end. I've only just said yuk a and then sitgasan kakana or zutat. So I'm glad I heard that.
I think it's one of these little technicalities that's just fallen off. And I think it's fine. Someone was giving me a hard time about it. He's like, it's been that way since time immemorial. I was like, all right. Right. Settle down.
Yakayi. Well, Go ahead.
Oh, when I say Tiagan, some people don't like that either.
I think
Can't please everyone.
yeah, that was fine. Some people were saying Tsuye for Tsuye plus a teen. I was getting grumpy about that one. But, you know.
I know that I am in my first year. Philosophically, I feel like I want to learn the most proper way, and then use slang or colloquialisms sparingly, because I think I really admire you for this, that we're all part of a generation of revitalizers, and I feel like there's maybe carries a responsibility to learn the best way or the most
Okay, hayati.
Yak Johan. Okay. Renee, should we take a break now or should we go through some of the conversation? So folks who I chatted with, we've got some folks who have a skit that they'd like to present. So if you have a conversation that you'd like to share with the group, we can do that. If you don't have a conversation or you have more questions about, I want to say this, but I'm not sure how, or where do I find this, well, maybe we'll do that after presentation. So if you are one of those groups, we'll do the conversation presentations first, and then we'll look at some of the questions you folk have, because in the groups that I could get to in the time that I had, there were some pretty good questions about how to talk about things. So on a break now, or?
I think we should hear any prepared statements, and then take a break, and then do questions, and then we'll do something else.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe I'll just go, because I can see who was in what room. Ask you folks if you're ready. If you're not, no pressure at all. We'll come back to your folks' questions. But I do know that Nila Toga's group has a skit, so maybe we'll start with them if they're ready.
Ah.
Ah.
Mary, Crystal, are you guys here?
Yep.
Want me to go? Guk.
ine. Chididean chakach. Mary ka ine.
Ya achi chwasiku.
Ach twasagu achi. She.
Hagus kisani yaha. It ahek uwachaka wa kwa iateka. Hi ina hi ina hucha.
Kunakuke. Kunakuke.
Goodness, teach atlin. Crystal dasa ye da ina.
Gande at yan. Gu hukuk. Yak gunas cheese huchawa.
Okay, cheese.
It's catchy.
How good's come here first. Kesani, little boys. Kesani literally means like little spines or little tree trunks. Well, it's little tree trunks. What Nora said is they're all spine. Teeth. What is it? Teeth. The dog salmon are swimming up. Maybe you will spear one. Okay, goodness cheese.
Goodness cheese.
Any other groups want to present your model dialogue? If you don't have one, it's all good.
Our group spoke about a couple of different things with the lesson my grandfather gave me as a child on Gunas Chish to the Kwani ceremony to say thank you, just important, and seeing the writing in your dictionary in different places. I been focusing on that a little bit to learn more. So I don't know that all my words are correct, but I'm putting together things to keep looking at it. Salmon ceremony. Thank you, grandfather, for this lesson. Salmon bones, lay them, put them down. Below the river. And then let's see. Yeah, awu Khatya atwune ka gnachish se ka ak aye kusti adan yuta watan klagu ka kwank ya atwune khat kwani. So just a thank you ceremony for the fish every year to keep bringing them back. You know, I asked him that question in breakfast one morning, and he was sitting there with his mouth hanging open. And he's like, let's get in the Jeep, and took me to the river, showed me. And then, you say thank you to everything. And he showed me pictures of the old 8mm films of the old fish traps and how much fish there used to be, millions of fish. And so in Black Elk book I'd read, there was a vision from the salmon people for one of their deals that said that take, we're not going to support you and come back because you don't say thank you. It was in a Sioux writing, and I was like, wow. So that's my focus too, is to take what I was taught and then expand on it and still think about it. And then our group had other stories too, and if they'd want to tell their portions too, there was some good stuff on songs and culture, oral history from the South. It was good. Okay.
Sheesh. Ukecha. Yewe we chat kwani. Chatsu. Ach I has outletu. Washwe chat dae ne. Akawe. A itch kunach yake. A hinde aya kuchis ne. Ya has to sake. Shai. Dasa aya tlkicha dat awu. Ku. Ye awa. Adya wane. Ade adya wane has to jichtuti. Ya da jachsawe ye gachtusane. Ya has to da it. Ya chatlakat at awa yak qaher qudzati. Ajawe yak a cleat gay ach kitakawu ach jit awe. Awat ausata. We lleq aya llege qa lledall ye awe khat yawsaqa walli yadki hasituasagu hasawsatini I khashi ye awe hasituasagu hasawsatini qa tawasagu tuakhai ye awe khohash akhuh ayaqutzatil takata du sha da ye ti akhuh a itkhal takatwe tsaqi qa dasa tlkach tu khai at yagwela tu de irsani we tat aya hin kadzedi akach aya khagud ye we khwatan has the ide kun chish ya khayhi ti tlkat we khat qwani ye we tlkatat aya qaya akhcha yqatangi ha anika ajwe tlkatin yu khatullat yewa akhtuasku yisaku when qanins khasatin tlkat ye khaya would do it qit aya hastu ai aktut aya wuhi khwasa atka qonne wutusaku hlaka saya chakuge aya ye jene hastu dat ajoy akhtuasaku kadena aya has yejitune helchas chakuge aya ye gachtusane ya haqusti ya hayuqatangitin yewa ajoy ke awe yuqatankat khitle yekh chaltakatat in dasa ijaq dasa kakikha wa asqani hassu man qanins qa tsacht tsekshaltin chadasa we kayani Gulchish ajoy yikakwahash ya hanaku yes hanaku sakhsati halil ko hasas ausaku ya atkatu ewe atle nak yewe hatu wasaku hayisene khigulchish akawe qanshaya akayekhsene kahin yewe akhi awlatu ya shkate qasha ustla we kayani da yejetuni gulchish ekha gulchish it's good to the short version's good to put your bones back when you're done working on fish. Don't just leave them any old place. Bad stuff start happening. Sometimes I'll see that and I'll think, what's going to become of us? We just treat things any old way. We're always taught to give respect to everything. So that means extra work. It's a lot of work getting fish, cutting fish, hanging fish, watching fish, protecting the fish. And then you got to fill up these totes with stuff if you're fortunate. You bring those back to either the river where they spawn or where they run up or out to the ocean. Neighbor gave us khayq That's the way ʼatudli.átk.
Is that red snapper?
Yeah, oh, and they're big. They're big. Sometimes I forget that they're big and heavy. I carry one from neighbor's house to my house, and it's hard. But a lot of meat. A lot of the we call dli is the meat on an animal, and chuchu is the meat on a fish. So I cut all the meat off and put it in a bag, and we're getting ready to eat it. But we ate it, and then made sure I took the bag down to the dock and talked to it, said nice things. Thanks for feeding us. Everything has a spirit, so we treat things with respect. Everything on our land can understand Tlingit, so we talk to it. So, sheesh. Anything else you guys want to share from your groups?
Well, our group had a discussion. It was interesting that all four of us had different ideas about what success would be because at different goals, and we tried to talk that through. But the one question that we had a lot of discussion about was how do we talk? What's that? How do you talk about liking somebody's things, not wanting it, not trying to get it, but respectfully talking about maybe perhaps someone's regalia, or like along those lines, like you talked about before this level of not being flirtatious, but I like how you dress, for example, but how do you talk about that when you're talking about something significant like regalia?
Yeah. Well, maybe let's look at a few different ways, and then maybe we'll take our break. So I'll keep the chat open because I think some folks shaqawish and others might be dropping some good stuff in there. And let me grab that one so I can put it on. And yeah, so to go beyond the ʼatudli.átk, because ʼatudli.átk is, you're gonna. It was very similar in Hawaiian, because you could say maki maki au, which is like I like it or I want it. But the way they explain it to me is if you said like you came up and said I like your shirt, someone would probably just give you the shirt. Like, well, here you go. But then after you left, they're like, why do you want my shirt? What's the deal with him? So let's take a look at a couple of examples here. Let me pull these from the chat. And then we'll take our break after this. So yake is she or it, they or it is good, right? So yake is good. So you could say yake, whoops, awe, and then you could have a noun here, right? So we'll just put a blank. Yake awe ikutasi. Your shirt is good, right? Yake awe yisahu. Your hat, y'all's hat is good. And then we had a couple other examples. So we have kunach kashaqi. It's really beautiful. It's really nice looking. It's really, and so kashaqi could be, I think, interpreted as beautiful, nice, good looking, fancy. There's some different ways I think that you could interpret that one. Let's see, I think I saw this one in the chat. Ahwaqayati. It is pleasing to my eyes. So ahwaqayati. You could say that about a person and say, oh, they look nice to me. For kashaqi, it would change usually to shaqshaqi. So we get ahwaqayati. Let's see, open the chat. Probably got a couple others. This one's pretty fun. let me put yake into this whole thing. So we have yake awe blank, and then we'll say blank is good, right? Keshkau decay, it's not too shabby. That one's usually kind of funny because you could say keshkau decay, you succeeded, but it also could be interpreted as you didn't fall apart. This is what Raven said when he saw his own nose. You know, and it's really funny. That part of the story is just really funny because he goes, the short version is he's trying to steal all this bait from these halibut fishers, and he's going under he can lift up the ocean and walk underneath it, and he's real sneaky, but then they get this bite expert who can really feel something tug on a line, and he could feel Raven on there. If the other fishers, they couldn't, they just kept pulling up and their hooks were empty, their halibut hooks. So he pulled it and he got him, and he pulled, and Raven fought, and then they pulled his nose off. And he had to make a little bark nose and go around looking for his nose. And when he finally found the house where it's at, he looked at it, he's like, huh, keshkau decay. That's not bad, and that's not too shabby.
They would use this one too if, like, say, for example, you were an uncle to some boy that's a carver, and he makes something that's really nice, and you want to compliment it, or you want to say that he did a good job. You don't say, you don't want to say anything too good about it, otherwise he'll feel obliged to give it to you. So you could say keshkau decay. And it's like an avoidance. You're avoiding saying outright that you like it or you want it, because you're not trying to force their hand to give it to you.
Yeah, and there are some real cultural things here. Like, again, when I was learning Hawaiian, our teacher said, we see someone's baby, you're not supposed to say, that's such a beautiful baby. You're supposed to say, oh, baby ugly. And I was like, you're trying to get us punched in the face? Is that what you're trying to do? And he's like, no. I was like, okay. And then we heard someone had a baby. I was like, okay, you show us then. You show. And then they started teasing each other and just really laughing, because it's similar. You don't want the baby to get too full of, too egotistical about how they look. So it's really interesting. Yeah. And then there's a few. So when we look at these things, yake is a verb, which means good, right? Kashake is a verb that means beautiful. Yati is a verb that means to be. Kaudake is a verb which means to take something apart. It's for something to fall apart or to fail. Shaqaish, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, this one is this one's an interesting. Exactly how let's see. I've got a bunch of examples of this verb, and if you didn't know that that's what this one means, I don't think you'd ever be able to figure it out based on the other cliques. So if you say duwak akawa slik, it means it dazzled him. It dazzled his eyes. Duwak akaushi slik means the same thing, or it means it was too bright. Kauchi slik means it's too bright to look at. Duwak kaudi slik, his eyes are dazzled. Duwak kashigu means it means his eyes are dazzled kind of in a different way. But for some reason, means it's perfect or flawless. So I don't know. That's just what it means.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's a few of these that are going to be. There's a whole bunch of cultural meaning behind it, and you're going to run into a whole bunch of stuff like that. It's like, that's what this word means. That's what this word means. That's what this word means. Put them together, it means something totally different. Like keshwa saoti is a really good example. It means the literal definition is probably that's not how it is, but it really means it's okay, or nobody got hurt, or in some cases, all is forgiven, right? And so, ʼatudli.átk is like people, it was made. So there's a fourth person kind of verb, and ʼkedain can pop up. It's related to yak-a. So there's a pattern that some of you might know and others you're going to learn, where you can take a verb root. So a verb has a root and the root contains meaning, and you could put dain right on the end of that verb root, and then it's to that, whatever the root is, to do a verb that way. So ʼkedain is to do something really well. So ʼkedain ʼatudli is it's really well made. And that could, if you could, once you learn how to change these, you could say ʼkedain ʼatudli. You made that really well. So if it's something that somebody made, like they're showing you their beadwork or their drawing, then there's ways you can complement the work that they did. And you can also put this ʼkedain in front of all kinds of verbs. ʼkedain kaishahit. You wrote it really well. ʼkedain yejine. You worked really well. And so these are all nice things to say. And sometimes we want to be able to say that, like, you know, basically in English, it's sort of like saying that shirt's really great. That's a nice shirt. That's really cool. However you want to say those things. And then I saw, I know we want to talk about a few other things too, like how to talk about, because there's words of encouragement, which are sort of, sometimes you're just trying to say, keep going, but then there's also words of comfort, and when you're dealing with grief and loss, which a lot of our communities are, and we can go over a few things maybe a little later, and we'll take our break and we'll come back, see if folks have questions, maybe do a lesson or two, and then maybe we'll wrap up with like things that you can say when, because sometimes there's a performative aspect to Tlingit, and it's not like, sometimes what you need to do is offer up the right words when people are having a hard time. And it's a very powerful thing, but then there's some key things to sort of address, I think. And then there's some key cultural concepts in there as well. Like historically, that should be your clan opposite. But then there could be a situation where you're the only one in the room that knows Tlingit. And then the words need to be, they should come out. Tlingit can do things in Tlingit country and among Tlingit people that other languages can't. Because there are some of these connections that we were talking about with the salmon and everything, understanding Tlingit. If you wanted to call on the ancestors and really get in touch with them, you go back just 3 generations and they're getting to monolingual Tlingit. And so you need to speak Tlingit to be able to talk to them. And that's not to say if you don't speak Tlingit, they're off limits now. That's saying this is your invitation to go make those connections. And sometimes if you're not the one who's going to give that talk, you need to be there to understand. You need to be there sometimes to respond. So yeah, we'll go over a few of those things. But now it's probably a good time for a break. Ikshe. Okay, come back at 5 till, maybe? 5 till whatever hour it is, wherever you are. Sheesh.
Kuha Yukusiyantua Aiya Aiya Shikiga Yayagi Adakanki Akatanki Akatan Akuni Ai Idashi Tukasi Tukasi Karaka Uha Tu Itu Aiya 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 Diana good Hadiki Arakawu.
Hunahuke.
Yewe kunahuke.
Okay. Gout cow de hit chi shuhan. This is the halfway point of the whole workshop. We're halfway done. So it's probably a good time to just check in, say, got any questions? Got any other things that came up today, or just things you're hoping we touch on before we go? Next week we only have 4 days. Ida will be running the whole show tomorrow and Friday, as I'll be retreating with my family. So, you folks have any questions? Any things you want to know? We might not answer them all right now, but this help us line up sort of next week. It goes fast once we sort of get started. So, what's up, you two Wooch?
I just have a quick question that will help me at least kind of understand a bit more. What's the sentence structure? I know you kind of touched up on it when you were looking through the dictionary, but what is generally the sentence structure on forming a sentence?
Yeah, that's a great question. In Hawaiian, when they teach Hawaiian, they teach using he'e, what we'd call naq, an octopus. And I like that example. So basically, you might have some different parts, like it has tentacles, and every tentacle could be a chunk of things. And some things have to be together. Like if you're trying to say, you stole my pen, ach kuhidayi has to stay there, ʼatudli has to be there. But they got to stay together as far as ach kuhidayi and ʼatudli. But you could move them around. And so one of the things that we notice about Tlingit, those of us who study it, is it has a bit of a flexible word order in a lot of cases. As long as you remember that sometimes they have to be in these specific chunks, like it's got to be the little octopus, the finger or the tentacle. So you could say ach kuhiti ʼatudli, and you could say ʼatudli ach kuhiti. I'm guessing most speakers would say, but I guess it's kind of different. And so what Tlingit likes to do is it puts the most important information first. So if the most important thing that I'm saying is you stole it, it's a ʼatudli ach kuhiti. And so now what I might be criticizing is your stealing. But then I could say ach kuhiti ʼatudli, because maybe I see you with my pen. I'm like, ach kuhiti ʼatudli. So now like I'm pointing out that that's my pen and that you stole it. And so it depends. Like, so as we learn a language, we learn like these artificial forms of the language. Like here's a sample sentence, here's a dialogue. But then sometimes those things are a little bit more flexible. When we get into a verb, there are pronouns that get built into the verb, and they have to go in a specific order. So the pronoun would be like, in English, there would be she, her, him, he, they, them, me, I, those types of things. And what you'll find is in English, there's a preferred order. And English likes to go subject, verb, object. So you stole my pen. But if I'm getting a little poetic, I could move that around. It was my pen that you stole. But I've got to push the language to do that. The other thing is if we look at something like he called her. But then in English, if I give them names, the he and the her go away. So I could say Jimmy called Susie. So there's a couple of things to think about with Tlingit. There's one, is those pronouns never get replaced. They don't go away. So you would, and then the other thing is they go object, subject, verb. So you would say her, he, called, right? And then it has to go in that order. So those are non-negotiable things. But then it gets a little bit tricky because a lot of third person things aren't even marked. So you'd say, for example, if I were just using English words and Tlingit grammar, I would say, it I stole, it you stole, it stole. So there's not even a pronoun there for the third person. That gets a little sneaky for some people. That you just sort of, the whole pronoun reverts to this thing. We use it like a zero marker. So that's kind of how I try and get folks to start thinking about it. And as we look at examples, like one of the things you could do as you learn Tlingit is you could just start scrolling through the verb dictionary. It's a string of kind of random sentences. Tlingit yuchatungi shtutultu. So this names the noun first. That's a noun. The Tlingit language, Tlingit yuchatungi. Shtutultu. We are studying it. Shtuch ake at iltu. So here we've got do they study? So there's a couple things, like in the 1970s, I think everything's translated as he, unless you need to specify that it's female. We're kind of just translating it as a singular they these days, because there's no gender in there at all in the Tlingit pronouns. But the other thing to sort of keep an eye on is shtuch ake. This ake turns a statement into a yes or no question. And it doesn't always just pop up at the end. It pops up immediately after whatever you're questioning. So the shtuch is to the inside of oneself. That's what's being questioned. And then at iltu is to, on its own, it's to sort of teach, but then it becomes to teach it inside of oneself. That's studying. We are going to try to make it to shore. This is a verb, we are going to try. It to succeed. So this is tying two verbs together. So like there's some reasons why you would just go through and start reading this. One is just to sort of just have some sentences to read, and you don't have to string them all together to understand like some bigger narrative. There's also probably a lot more straightforward language in here. When you get into the stories, it's going to bump it up to these super complicated verbs. And then you could start to sort of, the more you put it together, you'll say, okay, well, here's this yagach yidlach. Well, in this case, the klech becomes part of it. Klech yagach yidlach. Well, this is words of discouragement. You are not going to succeed or obtain it, you all. Yechwaji, I believe, or I suspect you all will not succeed. So yeah, and there's a whole sort of thing about like sentence structure and word order in Tlingit, because then there's a lot more to it than that once we start tying one verb to another verb. Let's see, adjective order, going back in the chat. I think you can only have one. In English, you can have a whole bunch of them, and they have to go in a specific order. So Clifford has to be a big red dog. He can't be a red big dog. And there's people who study that. I think you can have like 12 of them or something. I don't know. Tlingit, there's two sets of adjectives. There's one that come before the noun and ones that come after the noun. And you just sort of, there's not a whole bunch of them. And I think you can only have one. Like, I don't know if you can say, but maybe you can have one if it's like sort of you could turn a verb into an adjective. So you could probably say Yasatki du shan, maybe. Let's see. I don't know about Yoda's grammar, but people ask about it all the time. I never talked to Yoda, so I don't know. People do bring it up. Let's see. Yeah. Other thoughts, questions? Sheesh for keeping that going in the chat. Shakaish and Ida.
It'd be nice to see if we can get like not just like the translation, how it would be said in English, but its literal translation, how you're describing there on a dictionary, like an updated, version of it.
Yeah, yeah, and so some of the work of folks who start to get into becoming intermediate learners, and so like again, just for our records, a beginner can really just memorize stuff. Like even though you could say a whole bunch of stuff, like you couldn't. Like I remember I saw someone speak. I'm not trying to disrespect anybody, but I saw someone speak. I was like, "Whoa! I didn't know they know Schlinket. That's amazing!" Clapped really hard. And then a year later, they stood up and they said the exact same words in the exact same order. And I was like, oh, okay, it's still impressive, but I know what I'm seeing now. It's someone who has memorized a thing. And if I went up to try to talk to them, I could not talk to them. And then intermediate is getting to the point where you can start, like if someone comes up and just starts going off about something, you could probably start to follow along. You might have a real hard time. You might have to respond in a lot of English. You might have to drop some English, or your verbs aren't really changing the way they should, but you're able to sort of kind of cruise along. And then advanced, for what we have in the Tlingit language community, it means you could do kind of past tense, present tense, future, do a little bit of guesswork, like say, I think it might rain tomorrow. Start using your opinion, start sort of, you can start your own conversations. You can do some longer strings. Let's see, just trying to keep up with the chat. Yeah, we can look at, let's do some ceremonial language maybe next week. And so I'll put together some stuff over the weekend, and I'll make sure that we touch on a few things like praying in Tlingit, and it's kind of up to you as an individual, but I can show you the types of things that are there. And then also, if you want to talk to the trees, or when you're talking to the bear and talking to, if I see a landar, I'm going to talk to it. I'm going to just ask it to not take me. So, but yeah, we could do some of that stuff as well. Other thoughts or any advice from those of you, the seasoned, grizzled veterans of the Tlingit language? Oh, great question. Sorry, let me answer this one question. I'll turn over. Well, we did sit around. We used to do these workshops in the interior. So for I think 3 summers or something, I can't remember. Would go in some order of Whitehorse, Teslin, Carcross. And one of those times we were there, and we sort of listed what we thought were kind of the top 20 verbs. And so then, let me go find where this thing is so I could show you guys what I'm doing here. Not that. So let's see if I could find, I think it's under resources and beginning materials, maybe. I think it's intermediate. I should have found it first. So we made this thing, I call it a Tlingit reference guide. And so what this does is we took these sort of 20 verbs and we went through, so kind of list them here. And it shows, like you're going to learn how to read. If you don't know how to read what this stuff is showing you, basically the big thing is like the capital O is an object, the capital S is a subject. This is who the verb is happening to. This is who is doing the verb. Then there's a list of these things and you learn which one to plug in. So then you could say, "Chat yisane, you did that to me. Ich sane, I did that to you." And then sort of, there's some other stuff too. We'll start going through some of these. And then it shows you like some command forms, some hortative form, like let us, let me, let us, you do it, y'all do it, let them, let people. And then it goes through and it shows you this verb. So here's a verb to be a certain way, like yati, right? And then to say, then you could sort of look it up and sort of do a quick form. And so once you learn how this sort of grid works, so that you know what these things are doing. So like, this is how I am. Yechatyati. This is how we are. Yehayati. This is how you are. Yeiyati. This is how you all are. Yeiyati. This is how they are. Yeiyati. This is how the plural they are. Yehasyati. This is how people are. Yekayati. So this is a resource that does exist so that you can it's designed, there's a book form of it, Global Heritage Foundation. This is their project. We put this together in, I think in Whitehorse. We might have started it in Teslin. I think we finished it in Whitehorse. And then, oh yeah, well, let me see, how does this gets pretty blurry. Hold on a second. Let me open it outside of that web browser. Good questions. Okay, there it is. So when you do zoom in here, there's some terms that we use, and I just want to say, we're not trying to displace anybody. We're not trying to disorient anybody. What we're trying to do is just develop some shorthand code so that you can look up something and then know what these things are. Tlingit has a whole bunch of this, so much stuff that goes on in a single language, any language. And then Tlingit, sometimes I just think about Tlingit, it's almost like these ancestors are sitting around like, how hard can we make this thing? Real hard? Make it harder, right? And so like it's a difficult language. There's no getting around that. That doesn't mean you can't learn it. You're smart, you're capable, you're in the right spot. But let me tell you what's sort of going on with these little codes on the side here. This is first person singular, me. The speaker talking about themselves. First person plural, us. The speaker talking about a group of people that they are a member of. Second person singular, you. The speaker talking about the person they are talking to. Second person plural, y'all. The speaker talking to a group of people, and the speaker is not a member of that group of people. Third person human, because there is a third person non-human. Tlingit Tlingit loves categories. It's like a big, huge house full of bentwood boxes. And they're like, we got a shukt for that, and we got a shukt for this, we got a shukt for everything. So a third person human would be she or he or they, however you prefer to do that. And then a third, so that would be the speaker talking to someone about a single other person. Then you have third person plural, a speaker talking to a person about a group of people that neither of them are part of. Fourth person human, it's just a person. Some person does it or it happens. Okay, so that's what those sort of things are. And so sometimes we'll use this as sort of shorthand. And sometimes what we'll have folks do is take a sort of phrase. We'll just jump way ahead. So here's, we're not gonna do tired. I don't let people see, right? So when you look at this and you say Wooch, teen, you will learn, if you don't already know, how to see which parts are in there. Teen is the verb root to see. That's what it has to do with. Si is the classifier, which we'll start talking about a little bit today. It has a logical and a grammar function in Tlingit. Every verb has a classifier and a root. Si, teen. Tu, that's we. We are doing the thing. And then the w part marks the verb being in a certain mode. For me, when I think of this, it's called a perfective, which in English you could think of as a past tense. But in Tlingit, it's really saying, let's talk about this verb in terms of whether or not it has happened. Watusitin, we saw it or we see it. Yeah, so there's some math involved with Tlingit. It's like when things start to smush together, they have these tendencies. Some things will contract. If you sort of go to the, like here's the verb root, teen, w, to, si, teen. You have three things in that prefix. Sometimes if you get three or more, they start to want to move around and smash into each other a little bit. Good question. Other thoughts, questions, advice from the advanced learners, intermediate learners?
I find it very helpful to look at the Sea Alaska Heritage curricula. That's probably because I've been a teacher, so I know how to read lesson plans. But one of the things they do is they're providing a script for the teacher and the students in Tlingit. And so I put an example, the Alder unit, in the chat. So this looks almost like a phrase book, but as I come back to it, having heard analysis and stared at your charts some, I find I can see the patterns, and it's helpful to me to have 3 or 4 that I can look at all at once.
Okay. Yeah, so it does help going into places where you have examples. Other things that we'll have students do is they'll take stories, like we've gone through a few different stories here, and sometimes you'll take a story or a speech or even just a sentence and just say, can you figure out what every component in that sentence is? And so for someone who's fairly new to Tlingit, they might say, well, that looks like a verb, and that's maybe a noun, and there's another verb. I don't know. And maybe that's what they're getting, and that's great. Then if you've been doing this for a while, you need to take that verb and then break it into its components, because a verb will contain sometimes a whole bunch of stuff inside of it. Okay. Should we talk about verbs for a little bit? So as you're learning Tlingit, let's see. You go from making some sounds and getting comfortable making the sounds, finding which sets of sounds you might need to continue to work on, whether it's the difference between the TL apostrophe and the L apostrophe the TS apostrophe the S apostrophe And so some of them, you know, you just might need to just, the X apostrophe can be like a pretty challenging sound for some folks. But so the sounds that you make is one part of it. The vowels are a huge part of the sound system. Then you start getting into like learning a bunch of nouns. Nouns, you're learning the names of things. Sa, cake, douche, yesh, ak, Wooch, Shaw, keys. And sort of you're building your vocabulary. You're learning what these things are named. Then you start learning some phrases where you could fill in the blanks. Blank, ʼatudli.átk. I want or like blank. Hin ʼatudli.átk. Kachwe ʼatudli.átk. Chatl ʼatudli.átk. Nayadi ʼatudli.átk. Dana ʼatudli.átk. Now you can want it all, but you start learning how you, and there's a whole bunch of phrases that you're going to learn like this. There's a blank, I could put a noun into that blank. Then you start to sort of get into the structure of the language. And at some point, you've got to get into the structure of the language. It unlocks a bunch of stuff, both in terms of understanding it and in speaking it. Because someone will say something, you'll say, oh, well, there was gut in there. So somebody's going somewhere, right? And then, you know, also as you start to speak it as well, you'll need to say, okay, I am going to ads in the canoe, right? And so maybe it's an unfinished canoe. Dach yikt kukwachut. I'm gonna ads in the canoe. And so these are some things that we sort of learn how to do. And because we focus on the structure of the language, it's a tool to help us become speakers and understanders of Tlingit. We use a whole bunch of terms that sometimes gets people frustrated, and we're not trying to make it more complicated. I have been told that. You're trying to make it more complicated. And I think, well, it is complicated, but we're trying to give folks tools to decipher that. So there you get a whole bunch of tools so that you can be in between English and Tlingit. And then pretty soon, you're not going to need those tools. It's like you learn how to swim, and maybe you got the little buoy things that you tie around your arms to keep you from sinking, and you got some other things that really help, and pretty soon you won't need those. But until then, they are here. Ask questions, throw them out if you have them. If you have things to add, just chime in and add things too. So our language is used. Using our language. An introduction to verbs. Chayech is a verb. It's a command form for build it, or construct it, or make it. So we're going to talk about how verbs work, and then we're going to go through some examples. Some of the folks who've been studying Tlingit for a while, this will be your opportunity to make predictions on how these verbs will be put together. So a verb in Tlingit is really made up of primarily two parts. You could have a couple extra things outside of this, but what we start with is saying there's a prefix, there's a stem. Those are the two parts. And what you're going to learn is how to interpret them and then how to put them together. There's a whole bunch of little parts that kind of go in there. And then there's a whole bunch of, so you're going to have these sort of lists of things as you memorize them. But what we're trying to do is just give you lots of visuals, lots of resources to say, you could go look it up for now until you, once you've looked it up enough times, you start to remember these things. In the prefix, which is the first part you say, the first part you hear. When you say wugut, wu is the prefix. When you say wutusatin, wutuse is the prefix. When you say kekok-e, kekwa is the prefix. So the prefix is going to contain some different things. No one's asking you to be a linguist. It contains what we call transitivity. That means, is there an object? Does the verb happen to somebody? Is there a subject? Does somebody do the verb? Or is there only one of those? Or are there none? Siudaku satan. No, it doesn't. There's no object or subject in raining. There's what we call thematic prefixes, which are basically nouns that you can put onto the front of a verb. You can put a noun onto a verb. You put a head on there, mouth. You could put a neck or a voice on there. You could put a finger. You can put all these things onto a verb. The face of something, the surface of something, inside, a whole bunch of stuff like that. Everything that has to do with conjugation. Is this the future? Okay, this is the stuff that's going to change. Did it already happen? This is the stuff that's going to change. You're commanding someone? This is the stuff that's going to change. And all of that stuff takes place in this one little location. But you have about 3 different spots where things can change. It's almost like you got a little combination lock, and you could turn those little combinations. And then you have a classifier. Every verb will have a classifier. We'll talk in a second about what the classifier does. It has a logical function and a grammar function. Then you have the stem. The stem contains 2 things, the meaning and then what we call the stem variation, which is what is the vowel doing. So this stem could be teen, as in huasateen, and you might have tin, teen, teen, and it's going to change. And so that's why we say 1 vowel, 4 variations, because you're going to see that vowel move around. It might be short and high, maybe long and low, maybe long and high. So sometimes we're using just this letter V for a vowel, or the letter C for a consonant. Any questions? Everybody okay?
It's never short and low.
It is usually not ever short and low, but I have seen short and low, but that's really unusual. Good question. Okay. So as we start to sort of figure out what are the things that are in a verb, here's another way to look at the types of things that are there. Here's the root, here's the classifier, here's the subject. You're going to have some conjugation stuff right here, maybe some thematic stuff right here, an object, and then what we call the preverb, which are words that pop up before the verb, but they become, you can't remove them without changing the meaning of the verb. Okay, they have a grammar function. Okay. So some of the big parts that we look at right before the classifier. So before you say that classifier, you're going to have the subject, the one who does the verb. As we go through, we'll just sort of say these things. They're just little tiny particles. If I am doing it, it's going to be cha.
Ha.
Cha.
Ha.
Cha.
Ha.
If we are doing it, it's going to be t.
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 T. If you are doing it, it's I. 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 You you all are doing it, it's ye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ye.
Yeah.
Ye.
Yeah.
If a third person, a singular they, are doing it, it's not marked. There's nothing there. Gotta get used to that. If people are doing it, or someone, it's just happening, that one is de.
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 De. So the object is the one that the verb happens to. And even though we're going this way, starting with the subject, going to the object, I don't know which way my thumbs are pointing on your screen. We say the object first. Okay, so whoever it's happening to whomever it's happening, we say that first. Happening to me, khat.
Khat.
Khat. Happening to us, ha. 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 Happening to you, eh. 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 Happening to you all, ye.
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 A third person object is also unmarked unless you have a third person subject and a third person object. Then it will become a. A. So for like the verb for love, sechan, I love them. It's unmarked. You'd say chasechan. There it is. We love them. Tusechan. You love them. Isechan. Y'all love them. Yisechan. They love them. Asechan. It switches. Now that object becomes marked. Just so that you know there's two things there. Okay. Happens to someone. There's two ways it can go. Ka. Ka. Ka.
Ka.
K.
Ka.
K. One more note on these objects. If it has a hyphen after it, it is written as an attached part of the verb. If there's no hyphen, it's written as a separate word right before the verb. Okay? If it happens to something, was there a question? Or was that just a, okay. If it happens to something, it's at.
At.
At. At.
At.
At.
At.
And if someone does it to themselves, it's shh. 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 That's the subjects and the objects. And that's almost all of them. Those are the ones you need to be able to communicate. Being able to use these unlocks a lot. Who does it? And to whom does it happen? That's a big part of communication, right? Like, who's doing the thing and to whom did it happen? So those are sort of big things. There's a couple other things that could pop up before the verb. The one that we'll focus on for now is to pluralize. So you'll see like these ones, there's a singular, plural, singular, plural, singular, people, something, self. So there's no plural third person pronoun. So in front of the verb, you have to throw this preverb in there. Hus. Hus.
Us.
Hus.
Us.
It's a little tricky because that can pluralize the object or the subject or both. You get it from context usually. Everybody okay? Questions?
Or for that ka and ku for someone, are there specific rules for when one is used and the other?
It's usually k, unless there's some other verb that has k on it that sounds too similar. So you wouldn't say kuwati because that sounds like the weather. So then you'd say kayati.
Sheesh.
So k is usually what it is. Or if there's a k prefix that can pop up onto a verb. It's a thematic prefix. So if that's on there, then you wouldn't, it just sort of locks up that spot. Good question. So let's start thinking about who does a verb. Even though the word order goes object, subject, we're going to just look at who does a verb because that's a lot of what we talk about, right? Who's doing the thing. So we're going to look at our lists of subjects. So here they are, cha, tu, I, ye, nothing, and do. And then we're going to sort of practice looking at what happens with a verb. And when we start doing this stuff, we start with I, you, and a singular they. We'll do the other stuff later, right? Just starting with 3 so we can start to introduce this and just sort of see what happens in the patterns. Before we look at the verb, though, we got to talk about the classifier. Every tlingit verb has a classifier. The classifier belongs to one of 4 groups: the 0 group, the S group, the L group, and the SH group. They have a kind of a logical function to them. To start to sort of unpack that, 0 is the default. There are more 0 classifier verbs by far than any of the others. One of the reasons you might switch to S or L is because you're saying it doesn't just happen, somebody made it happen. Yuck A, it's good. Yishik A, you made it better. Saying the A part is still there, but the classifier switches to say somebody's making this happen. Okay? You could say Yanik, sick. And then you could say Ausanik, somebody gave somebody a cold. Somebody got somebody sick. So the S and the L both do that sort of function for somebody to make the thing happen. Not every time, but that's a pretty common way that it works. The other thing that the classifier does is the S group classifiers are pretty commonly associated with putting things into categories. Yati, it is, or it be. City, it is a member of a specific group. Khatin, I see something. I see it like Kate Khatin, I see a dog. Kate Akhkatli Khosatin, I see my dog. It's a specific dog. So the S classifier is kind of associated with putting things into categories. The L classifier is pretty often associated with something having something. So for example, if you have a house hit. If you put a big old killer whale dorsal fin on it, you have gushi hit, because goosh is a thumb. Goose is a cloud. Goose. The weather has clouds. So that's what the L classifier tends to do. Groups having a thing, and then the SH one, there's fewer SH classifier verbs than everything, and it's kind of generally, not all the time, associated with things that people don't really want. So kind of negative types of things. That's the groups. When a verb belongs to a classifier group, it cannot change to, it does not change to another group. If it changes groups, it's a different verb. Okay, so you have a verb root. One way you could make new verbs is by changing the classifier. It will move within the group. So this is the default form of the classifier. 0, da, sa, s, sha, sha, sh. And if you really want to think about it, the starting point is usually 0, sa, sha, sha. It can get the vowel I. It's like turning a switch. You could turn that vowel switch on if you're talking about the verb happening. Is it good? Yak-a. Do I see it? Chwasitin. Is it strong? Chitzin. So if the plus I is usually you're talking about the verb has happened. It is that way. That's what we're saying. Otherwise, it might not have happened. Future hasn't happened. Any negative form hasn't happened. So then they stay what we call, well, we used to call these minus I plus I. And now I like to think of it as like, this is just how it is, but you could turn this I part on. And even though we call it plus I, you see an I there, I. But this is the one exception. It's ya. That's just. The last thing about the classifier is it can have the D component activated. So you can see here it goes from nothing to da, ya to di, sa to s, si to zi. So you can kind of hear that D sound, especially in these plus sides, zi, gli, j. The D will be there to signal usually one of two things. The subject, the one who does it, is also the object. They do it to themselves. They're impacted by it. So that's why it might go plus D. Ich setin, I see you. Schwadzetin, I see myself. I am both the subject and the object. It's called middle voice. It's not really something that English has, but that's not a big, there's plenty of other languages that do. The other time you might have a D in there, and this is it's a little tricky for some people, is sometimes there is an object and a subject in the verb, and you boot the object out of there. For example, someone might say, what did you do last night? And I might say, ya chwatu, even though it's blank. I read this book. There is a thing there. So that is this one, chwatu. What did you do last night? Chwaditu. I read. I was reading maybe the newspaper, maybe that book, maybe Facebook or whatever. So sometimes there's an object there and you kick it out and that pushes it plus D. There's a couple other things that do. If you've been studying Tlingit for a while, the fourth person will push some of those things plus D as well. It's got a fun set of rules, but I'll pause and see how we're doing. Wasahayati. Okay.
Goodness, sheesh.
Oh.
Woohoo. I'm dog paddling and keeping my nose up.
Yeah, that's what you gotta do. Okay, I see a hand up. You got a thought or a question?
Okay. Hi. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the concept of a classifier. It seems like it's part pronoun, part category. Are there any words in English that have anything remotely comparable, even though it's probably different?
I don't know, because for Tlingit, like, it encodes a lot of stuff in this space, this sort of logic thing. To really what it does, it says, okay, the root says what the meaning is. The classifier says what the verb is doing.
Okay.
Right? What kinds of things are we talking about? So one example might be teen. So we have this verb root teen. That means to see. But then we can build a bunch of verbs out of that. So you have the ya, the zero classifier. It's to see something. Kit chatin, I see a killer whale. Kate chatin, I see a dog. Hit hatin, I see a house. But it's a non-specific thing. It's just a house. It's just a dog. Let's go with the dog example. Kate chatin. But if I've been telling you about this rascally dog who comes to my house and digs up my garden and poops in my yard and digs in my trash and just a ruckus dog, then I see it. Ha! Wakeit chasatin. I see that dog. We've already talked about it. And this is why I say ich You are a specific thing. I see you. So this now pushes it into it says, let's do a category thing. It's a specific type of thing. Now, I say, I'm gonna watch that dog. I'm keeping my eye. Once that dog starts getting in my garden, I'm gonna go throw a pine cone at it, yell at it, do something. With Kate, I'm watching that dog. Now it's not seeing, I am watching. And that verb chatin could also mean, I'll take care of your dog.
So it's connecting it.
Yeah, so now it's saying, like, it moves, we're talking about agency here, not just something, watching it. And then you could say here, I can't see, I'm blind. So now this, and so that they have these logical functions. So when folks are kind of newer to Tlingit, what I like to say is, like, just know that it's there. When you see a verb, try and find it on this chart. When you see how a verb starts changing, pay attention to what's going on here. And your first sort of function is like, didn't happen, happen, didn't happen, happen, didn't happen, happen. That's one of the big, it's like a light that just clicks on and say, oh, that verb happened. Turn that eye switch on.
Sheesh.
And talk to people who talk about this stuff, because the Tlingit grammar is wild, it's fun. And it's like, it's always like one of these things like, but wait, there's more. And so there'll be like a whole other thing. And so sometimes in like advanced Tlingit, I'll be like, tonight we'll read from the book of rules. Tomorrow we'll read from the book of exceptions, because it's like this. And I'll do that all the time. It's like this every time. And then I'll turn the page, I'll like, oh, except right there, Okay.
Does the classifier come right before the verb root? I forget.
Yes, it's always right before the verb root. So it must go classifier root, classifier root, classifier root. Okay. Okay. So let's look at some verbs, and then we'll just sort of see what kinds of things are going on. And if you've been studying Tlingit for a little while, one of the things you could do is go into published Tlingit Open up the verb dictionary. Open up a story. Find yourself a verb. Write down what the classifier is. Oh, that's a LI. There it is. There's that classifier. I see it right there. Oh, wait, there's the DZI. There must be some other thing there was something with the D thing going on. Let's take a look at a verb. This is a verb root, cha, to eat. Sometimes you'll see this little number 1 after a verb root. What that tells you is there's another cha, and in that case, it's to paddle. You can't paddle a boat. This one is to eat. So it's just saying there's a homonym, there's another cha. We're talking about this particular cha right now. When we look up a verb, we're going to see things like this. There is an object, yes. Can't get rid of it. There is a subject, yes. Can't get rid of it. This is a 0 group classifier. So we should expect 0 or ya. And cha is the verb root. All that information is presented right there. So if you didn't see the O, you can't add one. If you don't see the S, you can't add one. So it just tells you what is already embedded into the verb, okay? 0 act verb. From the but wait, there's more category, every verb also belongs to a conjugation class. I was writing about this on Facebook today. There's several Tlingit language groups. If you don't like Facebook, don't go there. It's a big mess. But if you're on Facebook, there are Tlingit language groups. And there's plenty of places otherwise. So I was going to try and sell you something and sell you to someone who wants to sell you something. But I'm on there anyway, so what am I going to do? So the classifier has its own function, right? It's usually doing a whole lot of this. What is the verb doing? And did it happen or not? Those are probably the 2 main things that it takes care of. The conjugation type says every verb belongs to these 4 types of action. I guess we could think of them. And in this case, where am I going to put these? Bear with me. Ooh, that looks icky. I'll put these guys over here. So you've got 0, na, ga, ga. These are your 4. The verb will belong to one of these 4 categories as well. And this is, I think of it as like a goal-oriented thing. It has some definitive stopping point, achievement point. You'll be done eating at some time. You'll eat it at some point. The na verb is ongoing. It just, doesn't mean it never ends. It just means there's no specified ending. It's just something that starts. It's not focused on the finishing part of it. The ga verb is upward. The qa verb is downward. And as you start to learn more about Tlingit verbs, you don't need to know this to know how to start using it. But if you want to use a command form, you want to start moving that verb around, then you kind of do. Whenever you get a command form, this will reveal itself. So for example, if I command somebody to eat it, I will say cha. And there's nothing before that verb root, just cha. That is the command form for eat it. How do I tell someone to go to sleep?
Not today.
Yes, not today is go to sleep right now. But if I took the day off of it, and just like this, the first time I told you, nata, nata. So the na pops up. That is a na conjugation verb. If I want to tell people to get up, If I'm from Tessin, I'll say ging danak. Or if I'm on the coast, I'll say gai danak. Ga, ga. Or if it's one person, gidan or gidahan. So there's the ga. If I want to tell someone to sit down, qanu. There's the ga. They reveal themselves in the command form, and then they affect the verb in a lot of other what we call verb modes. Maybe that's enough. And the grammar stuff is tricky, but what we end up doing is we look at these things and it's very abstract, but then we start going through some examples, example. It reveals itself to you. And this is the decoder key for the language. You don't need it, but if you don't have a Tlingit speaker who speaks to you in Tlingit 100% of the time, and you don't live with them or speak to them at least 3 to 4 hours a day, or at least 2, 1, I don't know, then you're probably going to need this stuff. And just because, if you know someone who has spoken from birth, you probably won't have a very good success rate if you say, oh, is that a ka conjugation verb? That's interesting, because I heard you say yay when I would have predicted ya, but instead you'll say something like ha ya on the gun, and they'll say yay on the gun, and you're like, oh, got it, because it's this one. There's a whole bunch of stuff to all of this. Don't panic, don't freak out. Tlingit was made for you. You were made for Tlingit. These are just the things that help us bridge from this English-speaking world, especially the monolingual world, into a bilingual, amazing Tlingit and English universe. Okay. Basically, I saw the question in there. The command form for a singular second person it will not have a pronoun unless it is plus D. So if it is plus D, there must be a pronoun. For all the plurals, it always needs a pronoun. And so it gets a little tricky too, because some verbs change from singular to plural. So I would say nata, naiheu. Or I'd say cha, yicha. Y'all eat it. Y'all eat it. Yicha. Okay. Chi shuhan. Tachonach yikewe Tlingit yukatangi. Wan kanins yata data yakone wushu ʼatudli.átk. Akawe chuwe ya hatundatani kamlachis akayutin. Yewe choach kakhlake edach. Gunchish chawe. Yiguaya chwan. Yin chasati yiku atlatuchu. Wasa hatuwasaku. Ya yitlaqi awe hayukatangi. Gwalli tuwasagu Tlingit yishakugu. Tlakyagi awe kanai ach. Akawe yagach yitlaq. Htekat yuhan. Thanks everybody. We are with you. Your teachers are with you all the time. Ask questions. We'll hop on that Basecamp link. We keep an eye on that thing. If you bring your questions here, think about this stuff. Don't worry. You're not going to get it all at once. Everybody has their path that they walk along with this language. But if you just keep going, you just keep trying it, make it in your life a language of daily use, and your brain will put so much stuff together. Also, just get out on the land, speak it. Just speak whatever you know, speak whatever you know. When you go to sleep, come to you in your dreams. That's just, there's a logical part, and sometimes there's just a whole spiritual part to the language. And you got to believe in it. Have faith in yourselves, be fair with yourselves, and and just good to lazy person gonna starve in the winter. So just do the work and stick to it. Ask questions. Stay in the community of learners, and and hey, people talking Tlingit in their sleep. You guys are in good hands, and I'll see everybody on Tuesday. Wooch gach tustin. Woocha.
Get dog then.
Nice. Cheers.